I have a question for you. What do Castaway, Lord of the Flies, Robinson Crusoe, and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening all have in common? Oh, excuse me. The life and strange surprising adventures of Robin Crusoe of Torque, mariner who lived 28 years all alone in an uninhabited island on the coast of America near the mouth of the great river Orinoco, having been cast on shore by shipwreck, wherein all the men perished but himself, with an account of how he was at last as strangely delivered by pirates. With a Y. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with Robinson Crusoe. What's that you say? These all have the same central thesis. Nah, they all just use deserted islands as a backdrop for criticizing and or revealing a facet of human behavior. Okay, now try and guess which one of these is my favorite to experience. If you guessed Robinson Crusoe, sorry to disappoint, but I haven't actually read it myself. If you guessed Castaway, you're close, but not quite there. If you guessed Lord of the Flies, I'm sorry, but even being a literature major, that's overestimating how much I like William Golding. You are correct, though, if you guessed Link's Awakening. That must mean that Link's Awakening can be seen as a commentary on some aspect of human behavior, which is what I am here to talk about today. Before we get into it, though, beware of spoilers for the entire plot of Link's Awakening, obviously, and also a bit of its predecessor, A Link to the Past. The two feature the same hero, and so here's a quick rundown of the latter for backstory purposes, There's this kid named Link who's 12 years old, living in the wonderful kingdom of Hyrule, and surprise! One day everything is now terrible because an evil swine of a man named Ganon wanted the golden power that was hidden in the Golden Land by the gods. When he got it, though, the Golden Land became the Dark World and everything sucked, so Link decided it was his job to stop Ganon, which he did. Congratulations, now you don't need to play A Link to the Past. Now it's time to ask yourself the question, what's a 12-year-old boy to do with his life after he's saved not one but two worlds? Why, have an existential crisis, of course! Welcome to Link's Awakening! First and foremost, I'm going to be using primarily the 2019 remake of Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch, as I consider it the definitive version of the game, but I will occasionally reference the Game Boy versions to compare and contrast certain details, or simply because footage of certain parts may be easier to find. To kick things off, here's a quick rundown of the plot. While on a journey at sea, Link's boat is struck by lightning and he is shipwrecked on the island of Koholint, which is said to be part of a dream of the Windfish, who remains slumbering in a giant egg atop the island's tallest mountain. Link discovers that in order to leave the island, one must first wake the Windfish by gathering the 8 instruments of the sirens and playing the Ballad of the Windfish in front of the egg. During his quest, Link finds out that even though the Windfish's dream manifested Koholint physically, the island still is anchored in a dream world, meaning that waking the Windfish will cause everything in the dream to disappear forever. Wanting to reclaim his life in Hyrule, Link enters the egg, rids the manifested nightmares, and wakes the Windfish, upon which the island completely disappears and Link wakes up on a pair of planks from his wrecked ship to see the Windfish flying overhead. Seems pretty simple, right? Wrong! Well, kinda. You see, not much actually happens during the course of the game, so you got me there, but as I've mentioned in the past, there are a lot more aspects of a game that can be used to interpret its meaning than just its plot. The visuals and audio are a beast of their own, and aside from the surface-level presentation, there's a veritable treasure trove of hidden imagery and meaning to find throughout the game. Behind that is also how the game actually plays, the things Link finds during the adventure, and the supporting characters that guide Link on his journey across the island. From washing up unconscious on a beach, to easing the spirit of a dead islander, to reviving long-deceased poultry, this game's got a lot of stuff to look out for. Before we dive in, or get shipwrecked as it were, I want to give you a broader scope of what we're dealing with here today, so let's talk shop about what to keep in your head throughout the analysis. This game is about waking up, in both the literal and metaphorical sense. It features characters not only realizing what's true about the world around them, but realizing their inner potential. In that sense, one could also simply call the game a metaphor for growing up, and though I will discuss why I like that idea and how it works, I think there's a bit more to it than that. So in order to let your thoughts stew as we go along, here's my quote-unquote thesis for the game. Though misfortune and heavy burdens may fall upon some people in their worst of times, everyone deserves and can get the chance to live their life in the way they wish. I'll reveal exactly why I've come up with that reading toward the end, but see if you can piece it together as we go along, or even come up with a thesis you think is better. Everyone knows how both one's childhood and dreams get hazier and hazier the further away they get in time. There's a sort of blurring effect which happens to both of them that puts up a curtain between reality as you know it now and reality as you knew it then. Link's Awakening plays with this connection in brilliant ways, or at least the Switch version does. Obviously, the original was a product of its time and thus couldn't achieve the scope of what can be done today, but even more important is the groundwork that it laid for the Switch to master. Just so you can get an idea of where this game started and how it has transformed, here are 2 clips of the same scene, one from the Game Boy Color version and one from the Switch version. Yeah, we've come a long way since 1994, but the intent and presentation of the original remain even after all these years. The easiest example to find of the blurring effect that I mentioned earlier is present almost all the time. You see how the edges of the camera are literally blurred? This effect is present in the entire overworld, and in dungeons is replaced by a black border surrounding the room Link is in. This serves to exacerbate the dreamlike atmosphere of the game and thus further cement its tones of blurred memories. But we haven't even scratched the surface. Continuing with the theme of childhood and growing up, we have the models themselves, including character, enemy, and landscape. All of the land in this game looks like a finely sculpted plastic diorama, and the characters look and move like wind-up toys. Their hair has very little extra detail to it, their eyes are simple painted black ovals, their hands are instead mitts, they've got some sort of plastic shine to them in parts, and heck, Link himself moves like a wind-up toy. Some might criticize the choice for purely 8-directional movement in these ultra-realism obsessed times, but to me the movement itself is stylized, as it makes Link look like he's marching along after being wound up, and you're just waiting to see when the toy will slow to a halt. Aside from the general look of the game, however, let's take a look at a certain scene, or rather a collection of scenes. The sequence that plays out whenever Link finds and takes an instrument of the Sirens is an icon of this game, as it not only exemplifies the air of exploration that permeates every Zelda game, but its atmosphere, you guessed it, plays to the dreamlike tone of the game. Notice how all of the rooms are dimly lit by torchlight and every instrument has a bit of a sparkle to it, and then Link fades out into a blank white screen. Overlaying the white is an ethereal voice which speaks in vague premonitions about where to go next. Frame by frame, the scene convinces us as players that we are slowly moving through a dream, almost as if we are watching a sequence of dreams strung together. Now some people may say, of course the instruments are in a unique room all by themselves, they're the important main quest items. But I would invite you to consider if the same quest were issued to you in an Elder Scrolls or Witcher game. In that case, your character would get a vague account of who had the sacred items, and they'd be found deep in musty old crypts, hidden in a booby-trapped but otherwise unassuming treasure chest. One must consider that the instrument rooms have to be tailored in the way they are, because if they weren't, they would stick out in players' minds as strange breaks from form and atmosphere. I could go on with more examples, but I don't have all day and they're all over the place, so let's move on. Just as, if not more important in this discussion, is the audio, as it also has undergone a complete overhaul for the Switch. Being limited by the capabilities of the Game Boy, Nintendo was only able to exemplify the tone they wanted to a small degree. Many of the beeping tracks in the original are abrasive and simplistic compared to the melodious sounds of the clarinet, flute, French horn, and bassoon used in the remaster, which together make up a woodwind quintet minus the oboe, by the way, alongside the ocarina and cello. Take a listen to the original Mabe Village track. Sounds lighthearted and a bit energetic, kind of as if playing outside, sure, but you can tell that the atmosphere of the village isn't quite as energetic as the song sounds. It's more mellow and calm. Now listen to the remaster. Sounds much more subdued, right? Besides that, it also fits what's happening in the village as a whole. Small town folk tending to their gardens, watching their children and singing in the square. and once again we have the toy-like aspect with it being played through a music box. In the reprises of the melody as the song continues on, we even get different instrumentation, which I haven't really thought of how it plays into the theming. I honestly just felt like mentioning it because I'm a total band nerd and wanted to stress how absolutely gorgeous their tones are. As a clarinet player myself, I am extremely jealous because that's incredible, but now I'm getting off topic. Point is, audio upgrades that mirror the original, but in a calmer, more subtle way like this, are riddled throughout the entire game, and it would take too long to list them all here, so suffice it to say that, together with the remastered visuals, they continue to serve the original game's overtones of dreaming, childhood, and growing up. But now that the basics are taken care of, it's time for the really cool parts. Remember back at the beginning when I talked about how this Link has had an adventure before this one? The one where he completes his purpose at age 12? Good. Link has embarked on this journey at sea for an unknown reason, but it is presumably to find what else his life can be used for now that he's done the whole world its greatest service. He is searching for a way to renew his life, essentially. Keeping that in mind, let's re-examine his progression in this game more closely. At the very start, before we've even begun a file, we see bubbles rising from the depths of the ocean, and though it doesn't directly show Link struggling in the water after the storm, that shot is enough to tell the audience what's about to happen, and the last shot we see of Link before the title screen is him on the beach unconscious. Scenes like this where someone rises from the water and collapses on a deserted beach, unable to get up and walk, are a good sign that the character in question has been metaphorically reborn. I'll admit that it doesn't have all the trademarks of the typical rebirth by water symbolism, as the audience usually gets a shot of the character physically rising through the water and subsequently crawling up onto the beach and collapsing, but I'm willing to be a little lenient here. Returning to the point, Link is given a chance to lead a new life starting from the beginning and free from any responsibility or renown of being a legendary hero. Link starts off the game with extremely limited capabilities, only being able to explore the tiny Mabe village and a beach to its south. But of course, as the game goes on, he gets stronger and can venture deeper into Koholint Island. Once again, some may call this out as being obvious and unimportant, but I say take a closer look. Each time Link ventures into a dungeon to find an instrument, he leaves with more physical capability. First, he gains the ability to jump higher, or really at all. Then he gets physically stronger with a power bracelet. Then he gets the ability to run, then swim, then breach long distances, and then even more physically strong with another power bracelet. All of these items represent his physical maturation into an adult as he relives his life and gains more and more experience exploring Koholint. The 7th item improves his defenses with a shield, representing both a hardened constitution and an ability to stand one's ground intellectually and physically, while the 8th and final item grants mastery of creating and throwing fire. We all know how big of a symbol that is for humanity. Compare this to other games in the Zelda series featuring a young Link, like Ocarina of Time, where he gets, in order, a slingshot, and then bombs, and then a boomerang, or Majora's Mask, where he gets a bow, and then a hot bow, and then a cold bow, and then a bright bow. Link's Awakening is the only Zelda game where the tools he gains directly mirror his maturation, and it is a subtle yet beautiful progression and culmination. In case you thought what we've discussed so far only applies to Link, though, let me introduce you to a ghost, Mr. Chicken, and last but not least, Marin. First up, this ghost is introduced after completing one of the dungeons, and tasks Link with taking them to their house at Martha's Bay. I'd hardly consider it being reborn, but whoever's spirit this is remains restless and cannot move on until their veil of sadness is lifted. Having seen their quaint little cottage one last time eases their mind enough to want for peace, and so Link sees the passing of the spirit from this world to the next. The spirit was mature, yes, but its will yet lingered with a desire to see how things ended up for its abode. This moment is really isolated and frankly quite wistful, but it is simultaneously heart-wrenching and endearing to have Link be reminded of what awaits him at the very end, when he's only halfway through his journey. Literally, because it happens after dungeon 4 out of 8. Next up is an arguably even more endearing moment, and that is when the flying rooster is brought back from the dead. When I first played the game, I was not expecting to see that, but it is actually reborn and gets a chance to live a new life with a new owner who takes good care of it. It's a short segment of the game, but it is nevertheless important to note here. Finally, we have Marin, the girl who takes care of Link when he first washes up on Koholint. Link slowly learns about Marin's aspirations and adventurous spirit as the game progresses, and it almost seems like she gains more confidence as Link gains more capability. At first she appears really shy and introverted, but you learn that she herself wants to leave the island as if she were a seagull flying where the wind would take her. She shows off her artistic talent by singing in the neighboring animal village, and later starts singing for the people of her own. Eventually, as Link nears the end of his journey, Marin makes the climb to the Windfish's egg alone to try and wake it herself. All of these characters have their own maturing to do, and all come into their place in the world towards the end of the story. As you can see, there's a metric butt ton of material to unpack in this game, and even though I'd love to cover more of it, and believe me, there's more of it, I feel that I have built up enough of my point to come to a satisfying conclusion. As I mentioned in the overview, I believe that the central thesis of this game is something along the lines of, despite the hardships faced by people who are both downtrodden and held up, everyone deserves to have a life lived in their own complete vision. Link is robbed of a full childhood before this story, being placed with the burden of saving the world, and worse, succeeding. He has little left to channel his life into, and no ability to relate to either children or adults, so he must be reborn in order to live the childhood he should have gotten. Growing up alongside Marin, he sees someone pass on before his eyes and learns how to help himself and those around him ease their pain. Link also breathes life back into something else, renewing its vigor which would have been lost to the ages otherwise. He has fears about growing up and having to accept his life as a full adult, which are exacerbated by the nightmares he faces and how they warn of his and the island's destruction. In a way, they're right, as Link's childhood self and memories will eventually fade with time and thus be destroyed. But ultimately he knows that it is more important to accept one's responsibility and take control of his life rather than languish in eternal childhood. Choosing to wake the Windfish, Link accepts not only his adult life, but also the eventuality that he will die, but is now at peace with it all since he carries the memories of Koholint Island, his complete childhood, and is accompanied by the Windfish in their return to reality. It's a sort of reverse Bildungsroman, where the coming of age happens to the main character after they have already quote-unquote come of age once, and instead must go through new trials and tribulations to experience the childhood they never had. Alongside the people of Koholint, Link has shown us that everyone has the capacity to grow and mature in their own unique way. The game truly shows Link's awakening, in more ways than one. Thank you so much for watching this video, it means the world to me, and I hope you'll tell your friends about it so more people can experience this beautiful story. I'd love to see some discussion in the comments. I always enjoy hearing different perspectives, and I'm sure y'all have some insightful thoughts on this. Obviously, I really love the Legend of Zelda series a lot, but I am happy to say that I have ideas kicking for a number of different stories, not least of which includes some Pokemon Mystery Dungeons, some Fire Emblem, and even the odd D&D adventure. Oh, and don't worry, I'm not just going to focus on Nintendo, there's plenty to see from other developers too. We'll get to that later. I hope you'll join me for those when the time comes, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay analytical.